Welcome back to us here in the newsroom. Well, as the possibility of a no-deal Brexit is now looming ever larger, the UK has announced an emergency plan to ensure most imports are free of tariffs in the event of the UK crashing out of the EU without an agreement. To talk about this a little bit more, I'm joined now from London by James Smith, the Economist. Morning to you, Mr. Smith. Great to have you on the programme. Now let's talk about this idea of essentially scrapping tariffs on 87% of all imports that would be non-EU imports. The government's just announced it this morning that they'll do that in the case of a no-deal Brexit. But it's a 12-month, it's a temporary freeze on those tariffs. Will it work? Will it be enough to ease the pain?
Well, clearly the focus here is on limiting the impact on consumer prices if we have a no-deal Brexit. But the reality is tariffs just are not the main issue here. Of course, if there was no deal, the markets are likely to take that badly. Sterling would likely fall back, and that will, of course, increase import costs. So that will probably immediately offset any impact there would be from the UK's tariff policy. But of course, don't forget, tariff checks are not the only issue here. It's also about the checks associated with leaving the EU single market. Now, the UK's policy, if it does liberalise its tariff schedules, it's also said that it may look to keep borders open in the event of no deal. That just gives the EU a bigger incentive, really, to increase their checks on their side, because out of fears of smuggling and kind of what's coming through the UK market. Now, those checks, if they do come into force on the EU side, that will only increase frictions at the border. There's been suggestions that at Dover, EU-bound lorries, even an extra 2 minutes could add something in the order of 17-mile checks back up the M20 motorway. So that will increase the logistics costs for manufacturers, for exporters, and that will find its way back to consumers.
And that's before we've even talked about what happens in Ireland in this scenario. Essentially, you might find yourself with container ships docking in Dublin that would be subject to tariffs. Meanwhile, anything arriving in Belfast would not. So how would that work practically?
As I say, I mean, the main issue here is the concerns around smuggling. I mean, from the EU's perspective, another example I've seen this morning is that, you know, why not just go and buy a car in Southern Ireland because there's not going to be, you know, tariff checks on the Irish border, and the UK is talking about putting 15+% tariffs on cars. So there's loads of issues here, loads of practical issues. It just increases the incentive for the EU to tighten up on their side, and as I say, that just adds to frictions. Adds to complications more broadly across the UK. Don't forget as well that a lot of the trade that Ireland does with Europe goes through the UK. Lorries come through and then use Dover. So it's a pretty complex issue. It's not, you know, not just concentrated on the Northern Ireland border.
All right, well, listen, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. James Smith there from ING, speaking to us from London.